Hello everyone and welcome to Eorzea Armoire, a series about the background of some of Heidelberg's more epic and dense weapons, armor, and artifacts. We'll be investigating the lore of these items both within Final Fantasy XIV and the Final Fantasy franchise in general, as well as the amazing and sometimes obscure real-world people, events, and artifacts upon which they are based. One might naturally think that the ambiguity and scope would diminish the value in analyzing something as this, but the Thyrus bridges between influences of such dramatically different origins without stretching or bending that I think it might be one of the richest, most pregnant relics we have discussed to date. To take the term unadulterated, Thyrus was a dragon that ravaged the Italian town of Terni in the Middle Ages, before being challenged and killed by a young, brave, nameless knight, a common and predictable tale. Thyrus is, however, a romanization of Thyrsus from, you guessed it, Greek. So that's where we'll start. Dionysus is a god of epiphany, madness, fertility, and theatre. In one account, he is conceived by Zeus, an immortal princess, before Hera machinized the death of the latter, and Zeus stitched the unborn child into his thigh to be later issued once ripe. In another, he is born of Zeus and Persephone. Hera sends Titans to rip the child apart and consume all but his heart, which Zeus uses to similarly revive him. In all traditions of Dionysus and Bacchus, as he is known to the Romans, a mystical rebirth contributes greatly to his reverence. The Thyrsus is first given to Dionysus as a mockery of a rightful scepter, but is soon embraced among the Maenads and Satyr of the Dionysus cult. A staff of giant fennel, topped with a pine cone and wound with ivy and ribbons, the Thyrsus is often taken as a fertility phallus, the pine cone an issuing seed. This may come as a surprise to some, but the Thyrus already contests the Gaebolg for the title of most phallic relic in the armoire. Common wielders of the Thyrsus are the Maenads, wild women drunk and driven mad by Dionysus who have a penchant for tearing things apart with their bare hands, animals, children, local kings and heroes, and invading armies alike. They represent a static moment of ecstasy, a Dionysiac, from which the flesh of every man and animal they consume is that of their patron, and they endlessly partake in his divinity. They use the Thyrsus to split water from rocks, summon springs of wine from the ground, and draw milk and honey from streams. Furthermore, they cannot be burned nor wounded. So we can see some clear aesthetic and thematic ties between the Dionysiac Thyrsus and the Thyrus, as white magic is a mastery of conjuring and draws from the elementals wild spirits that are chaotic, unpredictable, and natural, and as the Thyrus is a similar icon of natural fertility. The Pajali seed seers, in turn, draw some parallels from the more reserved and oracular accounts of the Maenads, Geralt's account of the previous vagrant wielder, a Tawa Kant in particular. So our second Thyrsus hails from the Bavarian state of Tyrol. In Germanic folklore, he was a primitive but benevolent giant and patron of the local village. He spared his villagers from plague, and his house was eventually converted into a chapel. But it seems that the town was not large enough for a second giant. By some accounts, Thyrsus felt threatened by the immigrating giant Haemon. By others, Thyrsus was framed for destroying Haemon's castle. In either case, they came to blows, and although Thyrsus was apparently larger and stronger than Haemon, the latter was already an accomplished dragon slayer. So Haemon stabbed Thyrsus deep in the heel, causing him to bleed a fountain and flee. But Haemon followed the trail and executed him. The last words of Thyrsus were allegedly, and someone will tease my poor German, Spritzblut, sie für Weich und Menschen gut, or blood spray, be good for man and beast. Haemon would later repent and become baptized, and the local farmers would discover the Thyrsusblut in the rocks of Carwendel and report its mystical healing powers. We know this substance today as Tyrolean shale oil, and it is still promoted and used as a natural remedy. The life of the giant imbues the stone with healing powers, as the living rock Thyrus too proves one of the ultimate instruments of healing magics. Thyrsus is also the name for a 3rd century Christian martyr, is the Latin term for a structure of plant which grows indeterminately along the main axis, whilst the branches have determinate growth. Examples include the lilac, the banana plant. Thyrsus is a shepherd treated in the first idol of Theocritus. The Cupid Ethys Thyrsus is a butterfly that may have informed the shape of the head of the Thyrus. Thyrsis is also the name of a character in Gagliano's appropriation of Ovid's Daphne and Apollo myth. There are so many references that we can imagine the Thyrus to be making from its name alone, but I believe the first 2 that I covered by far the more fruitful and the most likely for Thyrus to be derived from. But if anyone has any thoughts about the other Thyrsus or Thyrsis that you think I may have overlooked, I would love as always to hear your opinions and have some discussions. But that's all I have for you today. Thanks as always for watching. I hope you learned something. Sub and like for more content. This series will keep coming as long as people are enjoying it. But until then, I am Ethys, and this is the Eorzea Armoire.